Was wird daraus, wenn der Bohne mal tot geht? Wo landen diese Sachen? Wo landen diese Instrumente? Was wird daraus?
Hello, and welcome to our 2021-2022 academic year annual general meeting. I'm Alex. I'm your president. I have been your president over the last year, so I'm going to be speaking today and just giving you guys a summary of how our year went as a team and as a club and what we've gone through. So I'm going to get started and I'm going to try and go quick because we have a whole workshop after this. And I don't want to take too much of everyone's time, especially if they want to be here for the workshop. So just a little update about our membership. So this year we had 24 full members. This means they've attended at least half of the workshops over the year. It says rounded up to 7. I actually ended up rounding it down to 6. So if you attended 6 workshops or more, you were a full member this year. We also had 28 paid members. This was down from last year. Last year we had 61. Workshops, this year we will have 21. Currently, this will be our 20th workshop today. This is up from last year. For some reason, we thought that 19 workshops was not enough workshops, so we added 2 more. These were both beginner and advanced streams, and they were all entirely online. We've streamed everything this year, which has made it available to a lot more people. We had over 100. I said 100. Our spreadsheet gets kind of wonky for non-U of C members, but we had over 100 unique U of C attendees according to our attendance. So if you didn't fill out attendance, we don't know if you came or not, for reasons that I will say. And this was up from last year. Last year we had 97. We also have a lot more people who participate in our workshops and join who are either from high schools or they're non-university students and industry members. So we covered an array of topics this year. We maintained with our beginner stream that we developed our first year of the club. We gave an overview and we tried to make it a little better, but we still think the basics are really important and we wanted to keep our club accessible to new people. And that meant continuing on with a beginner stream. We also created how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 completely new experienced stream workshops. These were all completely new. We've never reused these workshops. They've never been done before. They were all done by members of our club who were learning it as they developed it. We did breaking into boxes, disks, file systems, and shares, OS command injection, scanning and fuzzing tools, Kerber roasting, hash cracking, bash scripting and pwn tools, heap exploitation, malware and memory forensics, hash functions, JWT tokens, logging and monitoring. Today is file inclusion, and a little hint at what our workshop is next week, because I realize it's not currently on our website, but we are going to do log4j. I have now committed Yasmin to that. So we've done a ton this year. We've gone through a ton of different workshops and topics, and you guys now have seen a little bit into all of those different areas. Viewership, we have accidentally become a YouTube channel. We're all YouTubers by accident. We have 689 subscribers. Last year, I was looking at the slides from last year, we had 100. Or we had 99. So we have significantly more subscribers than last year when we did the annual general meeting. We average 116 views per workshop video. Our Twitch went up a little bit, not nearly as much as our YouTube, 181 followers. And we have 1,214 total views on there. So a little less than our YouTube. Our YouTube's really taken off. This is a little screenshot from our YouTube Studio analytics. You can see that we get quite a few watch time hours and quite a few subscribers, and that has gone up and down in different levels over the year, but it's really exploded and it's very interesting to look at and watch. This is a little bit of analytics from our Twitch. I think it's interesting that we've streamed almost 30 hours this year. I guess we're over that as of now. So we've done a lot of content for you guys. We've made a ton of content. I'm now going to bring on Josh, who's going to give us a little update about how the CTF went.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. So hey, everyone. As you may know, I'm Josh, the vice president of the club, as well as the chair of the CTF that just happened. Just about a month ago, we had our second ever CTF over the second weekend of Reading Week. It was themed around the heist of a couple fictional companies, Omni Flags and Mom and Pop's Flag Shop. We had heist movies, challenges, streams going all throughout the event. Our team worked really hard to make this thing a reality, from developing 32 challenges to setting up and maintaining our infrastructure and to everything else involved with the planning. As well, we had 2 sponsors this year, Cisco and Tech, both of whom I'm happy to say were really involved in the event itself, and we had a great time working with them. So you have some of the logos there. And I'm really happy to say that with all the work that went into it, organizers and the participants alike, it seemed, had a blast. Nearly doubled the number of participants this year to 375. I think it was just slightly under 200 last year. And we had over 100 teams competing. We were also able to provide over $4,000 in prizes from top winners, gift card giveaways, prizes for the best write-ups. So a huge thank you to all the organizers, especially the infrastructure team who kept us from crashing throughout. Thank you to our sponsors for their involvement and making the CTF possible. And finally, a huge thank you to everyone who participated, took on our challenges, chatted with us in the Discord, and just made all the work we put in worth it. Yeah, thank you. Hope you all enjoyed it.
Thank you, Josh. We'll have a little more on Magpie CTF later. I have a little stats that are included in our financial update. So this year we had a speaker series. We had another successful speaker series. After last year, we had 5 different speakers come in again. I don't have a ton to say about this other than I like the speaker series. It gives us a great look into other people who are working in security, whether it be through academia or through industry, in a way that the organizers of this club can't really provide you guys. So we had a really successful speaker series this year, yet again. Communications, our main communication, I'm sure you are aware, is through our Discord. Our Discord has also continued on the upswing this year. We have 956 members in our Discord as of me checking last night. So we are almost at that 1,000 mark. This is almost, it's 367 more from last year. We also have a 65.5% acceptance rate of our rules, which means that more than half of those people can actually see what goes on in the Discord and are not bots. This is up from last year. So that's encouraging from 59.5. We also try and stay on social media just so people can learn what we're doing in other ways. Justin has been our VP comms over the year and has developed a very beautiful Instagram. I love our design language on our Instagram. He puts a lot of work into each posts. If you haven't seen it, you should go follow us at InfoSecU Calgary. We also have a Twitter and also a Facebook. So we try and put all of our different advertisements and media out on all 3 of those just so people can see what we're up to and maybe engage with us a little more. We also have a newsletter that goes out every month. We've maintained that this year, and we have 92 subscribers. If you haven't been looking through the newsletter, and you've got 2 weeks probably until the leaderboard winner gets announced, there might be something to look through there. That's just a little hint to some people, but yes, we send out a newsletter every month. We also continue to be on the What the Tech podcast, which is hosted by the CPSC Computer Science Department, Adam Runyons. We were featured along with some of the other clubs at the University of Calgary who are based in computer science, and we got to talk a little bit about what our club does. We still try and maintain a unified design language. We developed this last year, so not this year, but we've really managed to make sure that everything goes through our design language and keeps us looking professional. Relationships, we actually managed to maintain a ton of relationships this year. We got in contact with Tech, who sponsored the CTF. We maintained our contacts with Cisco. We also maintained a ton of contacts through different companies that we've met over the years. So we've talked to a couple of them, and we've been able to interface with them and ask about the quality of our workshops, what we should be doing. Sometimes we get industry help to make the workshops. We also held another B-Sides booth. We had another booth at B-Sides Calgary. We always meet tons of people at B-Sides. It's really fun to just hang around. Me and Josh also did a short presentation there about what our club does and just what we're up to allow other people in the InfoSec community to be aware of our presence and that we're a part of it. So now a little report on the club finances. Our revenue this year came from Magpie CTF sponsorships and also our membership. So we gained $225 from our membership fees. Those are the people who become premium members and are able to participate in the speaker series. And we also obtained $5,067 dollars from Magpie CTF sponsorships, so that's from Tech and Cisco. And our expenses include our streaming service. So right now we're on a streaming service called StreamYard. We pay for that every month, a small fee. It just helps us manage this better. We added an additional expense this year. Our workshops got a lot more intense and difficult to host on the back-end side. So we incurred a little bit of workshop hosting costs just so we could run servers for you guys. That was $122. We like to give a gift to each of our speakers for being so kind to come out and speak to us. So that was $100. And then most of our expenses come from Magpie CTF. So we spent $4,790.16 on Magpie CTF, and in the next slide, we will get to see where those costs went. So in Magpie CTF, you might get to notice we spent 91% of our budget for Magpie CTF on giving back to those who participated. So I don't feel bad about that. Only 9% actually goes to our hosting. We try and give back as much as possible because it makes the event a lot more fun and it gives people lots of chances to win prizes. So our giveaways accounted for $1,583.33. These come from all of our swag bags that we sent out, the Try Hack Me vouchers, our Best Buy and Amazon gift cards, and also postage to get that all to you guys. It costs some money to send things across Canada, so that's where that went. The cash prizes also accounted for $2,176. So this includes the top 3 winners and also the 3 write-up prizes. We gave away Skip the Dishes gift cards during the event at different periods of time. This costed $600. And finally, the hosting of the actual servers and the challenges. This was a little more than last year, but it was still such a minimal part of our budget. It was $430.83. Our executive team this year, sorry. This year we grew a little bit. We were a team of 22, which is a ton of people. So we have 9 executives, 6 directors, and 7 junior execs. And I will go through these people now. So this is our executive team. There are 9 of us. We have a president, a vice president, a VP comms, a VP finance, VP ops, 3 VP techs, and a secretary. I think I will talk about all of these people in the upcoming slides, but it's a lot of work to be an executive of this club. We put a lot of work in to create workshops and to create content for everyone that is helpful and actually teaches people something. So thank you so much to all of these people for this year. It's been a lot of work, but it's also been a lot of fun. And if you see these people in the halls now that we're back in school, you should say thank you. You should say hi. They'll probably want to talk to you and just thank them for the work that they've done for this club. This year, we also took on quite a few more directors. Directors are people appointed by the executive team in order to do just more work for the club. The club is we do a lot of work. So it's helpful to have these extra people on hand to take tasks, run workshops, make challenges, do any of the things that we need. So we had 6 directors this year, Zach, Pratham, Ethan, Delora, Jeremy, and Greg. They all taught workshops or took on CTF challenges or did little background work that needs to be done. So also thank these people. They also do a ton of work for the club, and it's very helpful for us. We continued our junior executive program this year, which is going to be essential to keep this club running. We want to pass this knowledge down. I am still one of the founding members of this club, so we're still quite new, and we really want to pass this knowledge down and make sure that we continue to run. So we took on 7 junior execs this year, and the majority of them will be running and staying in this club, which we will see in the future. So now to talk about the outgoing execs. It is the end of the year. Lots of people are graduating or moving on. So I wanted to give an extra special thanks to these people as they leave the club and just thank them so much for all of their hard work and all of the dedication that they put into this club. So first outgoing executive is Josh. Josh was our vice president this year. He chaired the CTF. He worked really hard to get that done. He maintained relationships with all the sponsors, and he also did all of the live stream hosting while staying up both nights during Magpie CTF, I will say. So thank you so much, Josh. We wish you well. Sunny was our VP Finance for the last 2 years. He has been with our club for a while, I would say the majority of our actual existence, and he's been really helpful about keeping track of our finances, making sure that execs get reimbursed if they use their own money towards something that will help the club, or their own credit card, and just keeping on top of all that to make sure that our books stay balanced. Braden Williams is one of the founders of the club. He's still here with us. He's been a VP Tech since the beginning, and he's been very helpful, especially in terms of cryptography, which some of the people in the club who founded are not as strong at. So he's ending up his term with us, and I wish him well in what he does next. Brandon has also been with our club since almost the start. He wasn't one of the founding, but he was basically there. He was a VP Tech, and he will also be outgoing. Josh 1, as we call him internally, has also been with the club since almost the beginning. He was with us since before we went public and started holding workshops, and he has been a great help. He was someone who had a lot of technical experience that the rest of us didn't, and he really led us and showed us things that we didn't know existed so we could actually continue with this. Justin Yu, I mentioned Justin earlier. He runs all of our social media and also creates the newsletters. He does really beautiful work in communications, and he is also outgoing. Ejaaz is our VP of operations. He organized the speakers series this year. He also created and organized the swag for Magpie CTF, and also did all of the operations in terms of shipping that out. So thank you so much, Ejaaz. He was previously a secretary this last term, and he will also be outgoing. Amna has been our secretary this year. As the president, she has been a lifesaver for quite a few times. She's very organized. She keeps our meeting minutes. She also emails me or messages me the attendance for each day, and she just keeps us all organized within the internal executive. And finally, me, I will be outgoing as well. So that comes to the election. For the 2022 election, there are 24 eligible voters. I will go through who is the candidates. So our first candidate will be Yasmin. She is running as president. Our second candidate will be Daniel. He will be running as vice president. Our third candidate will be Gregory Vance, Greg. He will be running as VP Finance. The fourth candidate will be Miriam. She's running as VP Operations. The fifth candidate is Mariana. She will be running as VP Communications. The secretary did not have any nominations for it, so it will remain vacant. The new executive team will work to fill this in their new term. So there will be no ballot for that on your, or no spot for that on your ballot, but it will be filled eventually. Our next candidate is Delora. She is running as the first VP Tech. Our next candidate is Ethan. He is also running as VP Tech. And the final VP Tech candidate is Ned, and he will be running as VP Tech. Something to note about the VP Techs is that I've written this many places, but there are 3 open positions for VP Tech, so all of these people can be elected into their position. They're not competing against one another. They are running for different positions. So the ballots were mailed out at 5 o'clock today. So if you are an eligible voter, meaning that you attended at least 6 of our workshops this year, and it is on attendance, that should have been mailed to your UCalgary email, what we ask you to fill out in the attendance. If you haven't received that and you think that there is on the attendance that you have went to 6 workshops or more, you can DM me and we will figure something out. So please let me know if this is you. I do need to be able to see it on the attendance though. So I was going to share my screen to do this, but I have a fear that it will leak information about my ballot where someone will be able to take it. So instead I'm using a screenshot. But this is the ballot that you should have received. I will check my email right now, but the title of the email is, as we wait for it to load, it says vote now, the Information Security Club Annual General Meeting 2022, and there it gives you a link. This is not a suspicious, sketchy link. This is the voting service that we are using. This is secret ballot, so I will not know, no one will know who you voted for or against. But it is important to note that each of the candidates is running unopposed, so there is no one running against them. We still want to maintain, we don't want to vote through acclamation, so you do have to vote yes or no on each candidate. You'll see for President Yasmin, you'll get 3 options. One is yes, I approve of the candidate. The second is no, I reject the candidate. And the third is abstain, you don't wish to vote. Each candidate needs over 50% of the votes for them in order to actually get the position. So that's a little warning. Don't just vote no on everyone because you think it's funny. If you do, there will not be an InfoSec club, and that would be bad. At the end, you'll click continue. It will get you to review your ballot, and then you can submit it. No one is able to see the results until the end of the election, so no one knows what's going on. Our chief returning officer is Anna Tchaikovsky again. This is her 3rd year running as our chief returning officer. She is removed from the club. She is not a current executive or an outgoing executive. So she is there to ensure a fair election. You have until next week on Monday at 5 o'clock to vote, where I will then display the results during that meeting. If you have any questions about this, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can email our club at our club email infosec.ucalgary@gmail.com, or you can message me directly on Discord and I will try and get back to you as quickly as possible. But yeah, that's everything. Please vote if you've been given a ballot, and I wish you all well. I'm now going to pass it off to Ejaaz.
I'm on mute. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you, Alex, for that. I'm going to share my slides. So welcome, everyone, to our workshop on file inclusion. Just a reminder, I've posted the attendance link in the chat. Here is the QR code. I'll give you about 10 seconds to scan this. If not, you can just copy and paste the link in. So let's get started with the workshop. So the outline for today's workshop. So we'll start off by discussing what this workshop is. We'll do some introduction and background info, including talking about the URL structure. We'll talk about get and post requests. We'll talk a little bit about the curl tool along with Burp Suite. These are some tools that are important. You don't necessarily need to have them, but they can help with some of the exercises I have outlined for later in the workshop. We'll then discuss what file inclusion is. We'll talk about path traversal. We'll talk about LFI, which is local file inclusion. We'll then discuss RFI, which is remote file inclusion. And then we'll just have some concluding remarks. So tools needed, I've outlined this before. Chromium, you can do with sudo, there's a small correction here. It's sudo apt install Chromium. Curl, which is sudo apt install curl, but I believe this is already pre-installed with Kali. There's Burp Suite, which is pre-installed. I've sent you a recorded video, not of myself, but of someone else on how to set this up, which was in our announcements, along with Firefox, which is pre-installed on Kali. So some basic prereqs you should know. But you should know some basic directory traversal, like how to change a directory. For example, if you do .. that takes you to the parent directory or one directory up. The / just refers to where your current directory is. And if I ever say slash or the base directory in this video, that's just the base directory where folders such as the Etsy folder, the bin folder, home folder are. And we'll talk about more about these folders later on. So what is this workshop? So throughout this workshop, we'll learn what file inclusion is. We'll talk directory traversal over web apps. We'll talk about get and post requests, such as making them and how we can make them using curl or burp suite. And we'll cover the two basic types of file inclusion, which is local file inclusion or LFI, and remote file inclusion, which is RFI. We'll also show how we can detect if a site is vulnerable to file inclusion, and we want to understand the risk of these vulnerabilities and how we can protect against these vulnerabilities. So let's start with some basic background info. So how is a URL structured? So if we were to type this into our web browser, what would happen? So what is the structure of this? Well, first of all, we have our protocol, in this case, HTTP. You may have seen other different protocols, for example, such as HTTPS, which HTTP, for example, stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Then we have google.com, which is basically the domain we want to go to. And there's a bunch of different domains we can go to, such as amazon.ca, Best Buy, University of Calgary.ca, for example. So that would be our domain. Next, what is optional, which is a subdomain. A subdirectory, which is search. So this is an optional. Not all websites have them, but they can. For example, we want to do google.com/search. And then we have the begin query, which is represented by a question mark. And then we have our query parameter. For example, all queries are represented as a key value pair. For example, Q here are our parameter, which is equal to our key. And then our value, which is InfoSec Club uCalgary. So quick question. If you had to guess, what kind of request would this be, get or post? And just go ahead and type your answers in chat. And I'll give about a minute for chat to catch up. Wow, that's a lot faster than I thought. So that Oz is correct. This is a get request. So for example, if we went to type this in our web browser, where did my cursor go? There it is. Sorry about that. Just lost my cursor. If we were to go to any web browser, for example, we can just paste this in. Oops, wrong one. That's not what I wanted to have copied. Forgive me. Right here, so if we just copy in our example from earlier, google.com/search with a query of InfoSec Club uCalgary, we can see the top result is our club website. And if we just go to inspect and we can examine the network requests going in and just reload the page, we can see the exact same thing came in through search University of Calgary. Even if we did the same thing here, the first parameter that comes up is search Q InfoSec Club uCalgary. So this was a get request we just made. So get gets information from a web page. It's one of the two most common HTTP methods. And then the second one we're going to talk about is a post request. It's used to submit data to a web page. You can use it to possibly create new records, and it's the other of the two most common HTTP methods. So let's see these in action. So we have an example URL we're going to see. So feel free to follow along. I'm going to post this URL in chat. Just so you are not trying to look around. There's no flags to be found here. So there's the URL in chat. Let's just go to this URL. So for example, we can see there's two options I have here, a get request and a post request. Let's just practice, click get, and we can see, hello user, you just made a get request. It's as simple as that. It's pretty much just happens whenever you load a web page, And for example, we can even go to our network tab to get more information, and we can see the request method was get. Any questions so far? Let's move on. And next one we want to try to make is a post request. So for example, we've just loaded the web page, and as expected, since we haven't really submitted data yet, as I said, a GET request happens pretty much every time you load a web page for the first time, and we can see the request method was GET. But here we have an option to submit some data. So it's just asking us for our name. I can just submit Ejaaz. And we can see the content of the web page changed. It now says hello Ejaaz. And if we examine the network request, we can now see that a post request was made. So we saw how to do this from the web browser, but the question is, are there other ways to make these requests? And the answer is yes. So through this, we can use curl and burp suite. So let's talk about curl first. It stands for client URL and is used to transfer data from a server, for example, a GET request, or you can even use it to transfer data to a server, for example, making a POST request. So something you should always do when using a new tool is use man curl. It's helpful to know what different options, different flags you have on this. So let's talk about some useful or optional flags you can have. So there's a TAC O flag, which is you can save the output to some file, which is highly recommended so you don't have to constantly keep curling a web page. There's TAC-D, which represents data, which is useful for when making a POST request. You can send data in a POST request, as I just said. Send it as a key value pair, which we saw earlier when we have our HTTP structure. There is a key value pair for the parameter. And finally, the last flag I'll tell you about is the TAC-X flag, which you just specify the request, which is default GET. So if you don't specify anything with the TAC-X, it defaults to a GET request. And so just to note, these are just some of the many, many flags curl has. If you just look at the man page, you'll see that has a lot of flags possible. So let's just do a quick curl demo. So if we wanted to, for example, just on this web page, let's go here. Let's try going to the GET request. So as you can see, we're not specifying any data. So we just want to go to this web page. And we can see we have two options. We can go to get.php or post.php. So let's try get.php. Hello user, you just made a GET request. And we can even do with a POST request. So we have to do TAC-X. And we have to specify we want to make a POST request. We want to go to post.php, TAC-D, and it auto-filled it in for me because I just tested this paranoid tested this like an hour ago just to make sure everything was working. So we just have to specify TAC-D and then say name equaling to whatever our name is, in this case, Ejaaz. If we enter, and we can see what we expected to see, which is hello Ejaaz. Are there any questions on how curl works? Let's move on and talk about Burp Suite next. So Burp Suite is a web vulnerability scanning. It has many, many different functionalities. In fact, there's just too many for me to teach you over the course of 5-10 minutes, or even just over the course of one workshop. So Burp Suite can be used to capture and modify network requests. And there's many, many others, but I will just be teaching you how to capture and modify a request, for example. And we won't discuss, as I said, we won't discuss any of these today. But TryHackMe does have a very good Burp Suite track. I think it's a combination of about 4 different rooms, the first 2 of which are free and the other 2 are for premium members. So let's see Burp Suite in action. So let's go up here and just copy the URL again. And Burp Suite has a Firefox integration. I haven't done the Chrome installation yet. So if you follow the video, you should see this Foxy Proxy icon at the top. All you have to do is click Burp Enabled. And all you have to do then is just refresh the web page, and you can see that it is hanging, which is what we want to see. So we can just open up Burp Suite and go to the Proxy tab. Sorry, the Proxy tab. Intercept is on, we can see, and we can go to our HTTP history. As you can see, we captured a request from this web page. All we want to do now is press send to repeater, which is how we can modify network requests. So for example, now we have our request in our repeater. All we have to do is hit send, and we can see our initial web page, which is what we wanted to load. And we can change it, for example, if we want to go to get.php and click send, we can see that the request type just sent. And that was just a simple get request. Or we can do a post request. And we can, if I'm remembering correctly, hopefully I'm doing this right. I have to do something like that and put a few new lines in at the bottom. And if I've done this correctly, which I haven't, let's just go back up here, turn off burp because I forgot how to do this. And we can, for example, I just type my name in here. And now let's turn on burp again. And we can press submit. And as we can see, our request is hanging. So now let's go to burp so we can do this properly. And as you can see, that request was again intercepted with a post method. So we can send that to the repeater. So what I was just forgetting was the and submit to let it know we submitted. So we can press send and we can see hello Ejaaz. But the cool thing about this is we can also send the request type. So if we want to say hello Alex, name is Alex, and we can see hello Alex was logged. Are there any questions? Awesome. So let's move on to an introduction of file inclusion. So what are file inclusion vulnerabilities? So there's 2 different types, as I discussed earlier. We have LFI, or local file inclusion. This is when you can, as I'll explain more in detail later, you can read files that are on the server itself. And there's remote file inclusion, is when you can actually upload your own malicious files to the web server. So you can access different types of files through the local file inclusion, such as pictures, static files, for example. And users use GET requests to access these files most of the time, but they can also be accessed using POST requests depending on how the website is configured. So how do these vulnerabilities happen? Unsanitized user input or unvalidated. This will result in user being able to pass in any argument, and usually found in websites that are poorly written or implemented, such as in PHP. And as our outgoing VP Tech said, PHP is good for making broken websites. So what are the risks with file inclusion? The short answer, it varies. But the long answer, it just depends on what the user has access to. Can they write to files depending on how the permissions are set? Can they execute RCE, which is remote command execution, which again, we'll talk about a little more about later in the workshop. And if they know the exact location of files, they can read them, which again, we'll talk about more later. So let's talk about some more about path traversal. So we have the basic, I talked about the base directory or slash. Here is where we just have folders such as the etc folder, the home folder, the root folder, and the var folder. There are many other folders here, but these are the 4 that are most important to today's workshop. The etc folder has a bunch of other configuration files in it, such as the etc password file. The home folder has where all the users on the machine are kept by default unless otherwise specified. The root folder is where the root's home folders. It has different files, one of which is the .ssh, which has the id_rsa file, which we'll talk about more. And var has the www/html path, which again, we're just going to talk about right now. So let's talk about etc password. The etc password file is a plain text file, which is readable by every single user on the machine. It stores essential files for logins and contains a list of systems and accounts giving information for each, such as the UID, the group ID, shell. So let's talk a little more about it. The user output typically has this format. It has the username, colon, followed by a password, another colon, UID, group ID, UID info, home directory, and shell. And all of these fields are separated by a colon. So for example, here we have a username, which is Desmond, a password, which is X. We'll talk about what that means later. A user ID of 1002. The group ID is 1004. There is no user ID info since it's a double colon. User ID info is sometimes left blank, but it's an optional field most of the time. The home directory, home/Desmond, usually has the following path. It's in the home, followed by the username. And then the shell, which is the shell the user has upon login, which is a bin bash shell. So the username, for example, here we saw it just Desmond, pretty self-explanatory. A password, here we can see it has an X, which X indicates a hashed password, which is stored in the etc shadow file. The etc shadow file is always hashed, I should say, and is only readable by root if the configurations are set properly. And hashes can be cracked using tools such as John or Hashcat, which is why it's important to have a good password, because the stronger password you have, the harder it is for it to crack. Next, we have the UID, which is the unique user ID. Every user has a unique user ID except for root, which has an ID of 1, which is they're used to identify user permissions. And 0, sorry, not 1, but 0 indicates root, I should say. And 1 to 99 are reserved for other predefined accounts. Between 100 and 999 are reserved for admin or system accounts. And anything else is for other users on the machine. And then there's the group ID, which again just indicates group permissions. Again, 0 indicates root. Next, we have the UID info. This is just a common field telling more about the user. And the home directory is next. The path where the user is upon login. So if you were to execute the pwd command on your system, you would see whatever this field is in your etc password file. And this is where all the user's owned files will be. So whatever files, for example, Desmond owns, will be in home/Desmond. And finally, the shell. It's the shell the user has upon login, which is typically a bin bash shell, but it could also be a bin/sh shell. So now next, let's talk about the home. The home directory is the default location for users. As I told you earlier, it contains user-owned files, for example, where Desmond would have his files. Next, we have the root. So root.ssh.idrsa. So the .ssh root contains files owned by the system or the root. And the .ssh folder may not always be there, but if it is, it contains login information on how you can log into SSH. IDRSA contains the private key, and the private key is very important to keep proper permissions on, because if a user obtains your private key, they can actually very easily SSH in as you without even knowing your password. So for example, ssh.ssh IDRSA is also can be found in users' home directories if they have it enabled. And to SSH in with a private key, all you really have to do is copy IDRSA, the contents, to a local file on your machine. You have to run chmod file name. That should be triangle bracket facing the other way. Don't know why I did that. So the chmod just basically sets it to proper permissions, otherwise it won't work. And then all you have to do is SSH user at IP, tac I, and specify your file name. And that'll grant, if you have the correct private key, it'll allow you to SSH in as that user. And finally, there's var www HTML. And I included a star there because there's multiple files in there. And this is the default location for PHP files, which is not always the case, but if by default, this is where they are located. Any questions before we move on to more about local file inclusion? Awesome. So let's move on. So what is LFI? LFI, as I said earlier, stands for local file inclusion. So file vulnerabilities can often be in GET request parameters, but may also be found in POST request parameters, as I said earlier, which is why I told you more about GET and POST requests and showed you how they work. And they can be used to read files on the remote machine. But that is a big if and a big if you know their exact location. You can't execute OS level commands to try to find what files exist in your current directory or where files are located yet. And we'll talk about more about executing OS commands later. But currently, you only can do it if you know where their exact location is. So how to read these files? So websites with possible LFI vulnerabilities will have a following format. So we'll have HTTP, which we saw earlier, our standards, and then we have our query. We have our key, which is some name and some file. So here, the some name is what we are looking for, which will be our vulnerable parameter. So let's look through some code to see if we can find this. So I'll just show you some basic PHP code to see how it will look. So here we have some basic PHP code. These first two lines can be ignored. They basically show error messages if something went wrong. So here we have if is set get file, and this get file is what we're looking for. This basically tells us there's a file parameter on the website. Then we're saying lang equals get file. So lang will basically end up getting the value of whatever was in the file parameter. So file equal etc password, for example, lang would take on that etc password parameter. And if it's not set, it'll go to default.php. So then we include lang. So if lang, for example, was etc password, it would display the contents of etc password. Any questions? Awesome. Let's move on to our first challenge now. So let me just give me a minute to spin this up, but the flag will be in the user's home directory. Just a reminder that you want to find the following based on for the URL, trying to find some name. And just a reminder that etc password contains the users. And just a hint for this challenge that, sorry, just trying to spin this up, trying to do two things at once, but just a hint that to read the error message you see on the screen, which is why I left error messages in. And the website should be up now. Sorry for the little bit of a delay. And I'm just going to post the IP in chat. And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes from now to try this out, at which point, if people are still stuck, I'll give another hint. Something I forgot to add, sorry, it's in a file called flag.txt. So it's been about 5 minutes. I'm going to give you guys one more hint in case some people are still a bit stuck. Here's the source code for this challenge, the PHP source code for this challenge, and see if that helps you a little bit get to the flag. And I'm going to give you about 5 more minutes before I take up the solution. Okay, it's been about 5 more minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and move on with the solution. So let's go back to my Kali and enter my password. And we'll go here and I'll copy down the request. We were on port 4561. And we can see we are met with welcome to Mom and Pop's Pet Shop. And so far, we don't really see what we're looking for, which is our parameter. So the best thing to do in this case is just start clicking around, exploring the website, seeing if we can find something. And here, just by clicking on one of the animals, we do find what we're looking for, which is animal equals magpie.php. So what we do need to know is the flag is in the user's home directory. So let's try reading Etsy password since we don't have a username and see if we can find one. But we do get an error message. So we're not too sure what to do at this point, but one of the hints I gave you is to read the error message. And sorry, this is a bit zoomed out. If it'll let me zoom in, we can see warning include /Etsy password failed to open stream. So if you remember from what I showed you earlier, / is basically representing the current directory. So what we need to do is move a few couple directories back. So let's just do some // and then let's just do one more just to make sure. And see, but again, we are met with the same thing, similar thing, failed to read /Etsy password, failed to open stream. Now this might be a bit confusing, which is why I gave you the PHP source code. And if you look here, we're doing string replace. We're replacing every .. with the empty string. So the way to get around this is to make every .. like 2 dots and 4 dots, 2 slashes. So if we do something like .. I do 4 there. I can't read. I'm assuming, I hope so. And now if we moved enough directories back, we should be able to read the Etsy password file, which we can. And we can see on the last line, there's a Magpie user on the machine. Then all we need to do at the end is go to home, their home directory, which is, if you remember what I said, which is in home/magpie, and read flag.txt. And we can see our flag here. Just a reminder to submit your flags. Our competition closes in a few minutes, sorry, not a few minutes, but a few weeks. So try to get those last bit of fake internet points. So we went through our solution. And again, remember, we saw our source code. So what was happening there? So the challenge that used a few different filters, so which made it harder to read files, trying to make the website slightly more secure, but obviously not so secure because we were still able to read files on the machine. So these are just some filters. So let's look at a couple more. So again, first of all, we saw this one, string replace. It replaced every .. with an empty string. And what this one did is we did .. and we have the dot here and our lang parameter. Basically, it prepended everything we saw on everything we inputted to lang. It just prepended a / onto it. Any questions? Awesome. So what do we think is happening here? So here's another type of something we may see in our PHP file. We have lang include get file dot, and then we have a string of .php. So what do you think is happening here? Feel free to just type your answers in chat. Can you give a couple more seconds in case someone's just trying to type it right now? Doesn't look like anyone's typing. So just if a reminder here, we have include dot slash dot and length, which means the dot slash was actually, this is pretty much the exact what Ethan just said. Forces reading PHP files. So the dot slash here was prepended on, and here it's dot PHP was appended on. So basically anything you enter has dot PHP appended onto it. So this basically forces anything you try to enter will have .php appended on. So for example, if the file was dog, it would try to read a file called dog.php. Or if you try to read etc password, it would try to read etc password.php. And etc password.php obviously doesn't exist, so it would just return error and not be able to read any file. So it makes it impossible to read files we want, but not really, because there's actually two ways of getting around this. So method one is by using the null byte, which is %00. So everything after null byte is ignored, actually. So for example, if we did file is etc password, on etc password, instead of reading etc password.php, %00 would just ignore the .php, and we would still be able to read etc password. But just a warning, this is deprecated in anything in PHP 5.5 or below. So if it's another version of PHP, you'll be fine reading it. But if it's a newer version of PHP, this won't work, which is why I show you method 2, which is by using more PHP wrappers. Sorry, no, I don't mean more PHP wrappers. We'll talk more about them later in detail, is what I meant to say. But PHP wrappers have many different uses, one of which is you can actually disclose the source code of the website. So you won't be able to read any files, but you will get the source code, and that can actually may be able to help you discover more vulnerabilities or another way around this. So, and you can find other potential weaknesses. So you can do it by doing this, which I'm going to post in chat right now and then talk more about it. Let me post in chat. That's weird. Doesn't seem to let me post in chat. Josh, if you're listening, I just posted in our private chat. If you can maybe post it in chat. But hopefully, okay, here's what we can do. So it outputs index.php contents base64 encoded. And we can use any tool we want to decode such a frame. And now here's chat. No, I'm going to post Discord, actually. I'm just told everyone's Discord. I'm just post this in our stream chat. Hope people can copy it from there if most people are in our Discord. So to there's home directory. So just remember, you have PHP filter read. And I'm just gonna, sorry, this has not been started yet either. So this challenge should be up now. So we're in the user's home directory. I'm sorry, I won't be able to post this in chat. So you'll unfortunately just have to copy that IP address. Or in fact, I'll just paste it in Discord. And hopefully people can just copy it from there. But just a reminder, again, the flag is in the user's home directory in a file called flag.txt again. And just remember, here's what you can use if you get stuck to read the source code. And I'll give you about 10 minutes, actually I'll give you about 7 minutes to do this. So it's been about 7 minutes. Just want to check in. Do people think they want a couple more minutes to try to solve this challenge, or are we ready to move on with the solution? Don't see a lot of anyone saying they want more minutes, a few more minutes in chat, so I'm going to go ahead and move on with the solution. So let's go to our website. So we were on port 3857, if I recall. And again, we're met with the same website, and we already know how to find our vulnerable parameter. So let's just go ahead and try to read /etc/password and see if we can get a username. And it failed, but if we read our error message, exactly what I just showed you, it tried to read etcpassword.php. So let's just try to see if we can just use our null byte to read etcpassword and do it. Nope. It looks like we're running on a newer version of PHP, which, if I recall, we can actually just see, if this is enabled, we should be able to see, yes, we can see we're running PHP 7.2.34. If we just examine our network tab and reload the page, and since that's not before 5.5, we won't be able to read this. So we have to use our other method. Just to save some time, I've kind of cheated, and I have the source code available here. So let's start by reading through this, looking through this and see what we can find. First of all, we have our standard error reporting. We can skip past that. And then we have an if statement. If server request method is a post method. And we're making a get request, so let's skip over that for now, which means we're going to hit this if block. So if is set get animal, lang is include get animal, and append .php onto it. So which is what we're seeing. Else it loads the default.php web page and include lang. So not much we can do in this else block. We don't see that we can get out of here. So let's look in the if block. If server request method equals post, and we do if is set get animal, lang is get animal. So we don't really see any appendments or PHP appendments done onto there. So it looks like all we really have to do is make a post request in order to read our files. So let's try doing that. So let's copy this URL and just make a simple curl x post, and we just paste that in, remove the null byte, and see what happens. And we can finally be able to see etc password, and we get our username, AGM, which is actually just magpie spelled backwards. So we can just copy that, and all we have to do is go to home /flag.txt, and we can see we can read the file. Any questions on that challenge? Awesome. Let's move on. So far, what we have seen is we can only read files if we know their exact location. So we know that there's the etc password file, or we have the flag.txt in the user's home directory. And we need to know their name as well. So if the user has other files in their home directory, we won't really know because we don't know what they're called. So this is where RCE, or remote command execution, comes in handy. So what is RCE? RCE stands for remote command execution, or remote code execution. And this allows us to execute OS level commands remotely. So we can use commands such as ls to see list files, or change directories, or see what directories there are even. like I said, list files. We can, if we have permissions, we can use echo to write to files. We can, if there's code such as Python code or Bash code, we can, and we have the correct permissions, we can even run this code. So there's two ways to get this. The first way is using PHP wrappers. We saw one PHP wrapper, so let's look at some more. So far, as I've said, we've seen one PHP wrapper, which is the way to encode and be able to read the source code of a file. So let's look at a couple others. So first of all, we have the expect wrapper. So this provides access to process interaction streams. So providing on-demand access to data, which is disabled by default. So you have to actually go in and enable this wrapper within your source code. So for example, if you do /index.php file equals expect : / and then all you have to do is execute your OS level command. So for example, here I'm doing the whoami command, and this will display the output of the whoami command. And there's some very useful docs on this. I'm gonna post that in chat if it'll let me. Seems to be very weird at this moment. And it did let me. So right there is a link to the docs on the expect wrapper. And then another one we have, the second one I'll show you for today, is the data wrapper. So the data wrapper can be used to include external data, such as PHP code or OS level commands. Sorry, not OS level commands, only PHP code. But using this, we can actually get OS level commands. And I'll show you how in a second. So this works only if the allow URL include configuration is enabled. And by default, it is disabled though. And we have the docs here, which again, I'll post in chat for the data wrapper. I'm posting them in chat because I find them very helpful. And they're very informative on how you can use them. So step one on how to use a data wrapper, since we haven't seen it yet. So we want to base64 encode a PHP web shell. So all we have to do is use echo. Here we have a PHP web shell, which is PHP system get CMD, which basically gives us a backdoor into the system and allows us to execute, allows the attacker to maintain consistent privileged access. So it's a lot, so it won't be very weak. And we can, using this, we can execute OS level commands. So by sending the data, so we can do file, and we have to use this long parameter here, data, text, blah, 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 and finish off, and CMD equals whoami. So basically, we're including a CMD parameter on this website. So we just want to do two parameters at once. We can use the AND operator and do CMD equals whoami. And I'll post these two commands in chat, if it'll let me. Yeah, it doesn't seem to want to allow me to do that. I'm going to post the first one in Discord. So here's the first one in Discord. And the second one, just to make it convenient, I'll also post it on Discord just so it's all in one place. So I'm not too sure why StreamYard isn't liking that. Maybe I think it's malicious, probably. So prereqs. So just a quick reminder, change directory, you do .. for the parent directory. We have a / for a current directory, and a / means the base directory. Why I'm showing you this, here it's time for challenge, because it's time for challenge 3, and the flag is in a file in the base directory. And I'll give you about 10 minutes to work on that. So it's been about 10 minutes. I'm just going to do my usual and ask, does anyone feel like they need a couple more minutes or feel like they're really close and a couple minutes would help them before I go forward with the solution? Sounds good. So it doesn't look like anyone saying anything, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward with the solution. So if we remember, I said the flag is in the base directory, but we don't really know what the file is called. So we'll have to go ahead and use one of our wrappers. So let's go ahead and go to our file first of all. Website, and we again just see the same website. That's really zoomed in. And let's try using our expect wrapper first of all. Who am I? Let's see if that'll just work. And it's giving us our error, and it's a very informative error. It tells, did you forget to enable it when you configured PHP? Basically, the expect wrapper is not enabled, so we're going to have to move forward with our data wrapper. So the first step, if you remember, in our expect wrapper, sorry, data wrapper before code PHP web shell, which we can just do. This just echoes it, the PHP code we want, and we pipe in base64, which will just base64 encode it for us. I get that. Just copy it. In fact, we'll have this something else I have to copy first. So let's just copy this. So we can go to animal equal, and now we want our base64 web shell. So I copied in the results of the data wrapper. So we have the base64 string, which we'll replace here. We'll copy it in, and we want to execute and cmd. So we're in two parameters together, and we want to execute the who command and see if that works. And we can see we're www data, which is the standard user you usually see when you're working with PHP. It's usually a very low privileged user that doesn't have very much permissions, but you can still do standard commands. So for example, we can list stuff in the base directory. So we do ls/, and we see we have a bunch of our standard files, blah, blah, blah. But the one that really sticks out is flag bq.ede. So all we want to do is do cat slash, oops, what did I do? Cat slash, because we're in the home directory, and we do this, and it gives us a wrapper. And sorry, not a wrapper, but our flag. Are there any questions on this challenge? Awesome. Let's move on. So we saw that we can gain RCE from PHP code using our wrappers, but these still are not the best solution because they only work if we have certain settings enabled within PHP. So let's try doing RCE, the second way to gain RCE, which is through local file inclusion. So there's two ways of doing this. So the first way is through log files. This way I am not going to teach you. I just thought I'd mention it just in case you want to look it up on your own. But the second way is through the PHP session files. So what is a PHP session? So PHP actually saves the user session on disks. So the session files store user data across multiple pages. So for example, when I went to here, it actually stored that I went to this page. Or if I just do animal equals cat.php, which really was one of them. Yes, and it actually will save that I went to the cat.php web page. And this lasts until the user closes the browser or goes through a new page. So the page I was on before going to the cat page was no longer in the session. So these sessions are always saved to a specific file. So in Linux, it's var lib php sessions, and in Windows machines, it's windows/temp. And the name of the file is always unique, which can be a bit hard to find because it's based on the value of the PHP sessid cookie, which you can easily find by going to Inspect Elements and clicking on the Cookies tab. And the name of the file will be ses/_cookie value. So for Linux, you will have to go to var lib php sessions/ses_cookie value. So once you have this, you can actually poison the PHP session in order to gain remote command execution. So how do you do this? So here are our steps. So first, you want to find the vulnerable parameter. That's something we've done before. It's always the first step when working with local file inclusion vulnerabilities. And we want to navigate to the param is equal to some string. This can be anything you want. This is basically just us testing to see if the PHP session is vulnerable to poisoning. This will poison our session and add the string we entered to the session file. And we can use LFI to read the session file by basically navigating to $param is equal to var lib php sessions ses_cookie value, like I showed you. So, and there's one case. So if the session file contains the string we just inputted, that does mean that it is vulnerable to poisoning, and we can go forward with executing remote command execution. So RCE via PHP session. Here's how to do it. Oh, there we go. Why is it going? That's weird. Okay, that's weird. Anyway, so gain RCE, our session file contains the last value we entered into our param, and we can use this to execute a web shell. So we'll go to param is equal to our web shell, which we saw earlier, system get cmd. And this will allow us to execute OS level commands. We then navigate to our session file, $param var lib php sessions ses_cookie value. And if it worked, we should see this PHP code in the file. And since it has this vulnerable code, we can actually chain on a second parameter by doing and_cmd equals id, and this will execute the output of the id parameter. But this is slightly inefficient because you do need to repeat this step one after every command. So you do the id command, then you need to redo the web shell, since, as I said before, every time you go to a different web page, the session file is rewritten to. So you'll need to go back to here, do this, and then do step 2 again with a different command, so that every single time. Are there any questions on that? Awesome. If there are any more questions, just feel free to leave them in chat. And it's time for our challenge number 4. Again, the flag is in the base directory. And I'll give you about another 10 minutes to work on this challenge. Actually, we did have a question just come in. What's cookie values replaced with? So let's just go back a bit. So cookie values, this is based on the value of the PHP sessid cookie. And you can just find this by doing your inspect element and going to your cookies tab. So for example, here, I don't think it's be here, but if it's there, you can just do inspect element, go to your application tab. For Chrome, I think it's different on different browsers. And if you just click on the web page, you should see a PHP sessid cookie name, and you just copy its value. I hope that answers your question. And so now so I'll give you about 10 minutes from now for the challenge. Going to post the IP in chat. Hey everyone. So it's been about 10 minutes, and once again, I'm just going to ask, does anyone feel like they need just 1 or 2 more minutes to give this challenge one last try before I take up the solution? So I'm just going to keep an eye on chat, but doesn't look like anyone's typing. So let's move forward with the solution. So let's first of all, as always, go to our web page and click on a parameter. And we can see here, and let's see if we can find just our vulnerable parameter. Let's go to inspect, applets, can click. And again, we do, for this time, we do have our session cookie, which we can just copy. And we want to go to, let's just see if we can get some string logged to our session poisoning. So /var lib /php /sessions /ses underscore command B. I think, if I remember correctly, I did that right. Oh, I spelled it wrong. It's varlib. That's why it didn't work. Everything else right. And as you can see, it worked. It says we went to this web page. You can, so I should have, I forgot to remove this, but that's just something else I was including just when testing this website. So you can ignore the Spanish part, but we did get the right, we did get our previous string in there. So we can confirm that this is Sorry about that. Not sure what just happened. Just got the sound that my headphones turned off. So we did get the confirmation that our webpage was vulnerable to session poisoning. Is if we keep going back and forth, that can take a while. So two of the best ways to do this are either to go through Burp Suite, which is the way I'll demonstrate it, or we can do it through curl. So let's start. Let's see if we can grab our session from Magpie, and let's make sure we have the correct session to make sure it didn't change. Yes, our PHP cookie did change. Let's copy the new one. Oops, what did I do? Thanks. And let's try on burp and refresh the web page so it can get intercepted. So we go to proxy and we can see our request was intercepted. So all we have to do is send that to a repeater. And we click send. We view the Magpie page. And let's just double check some string. And we press send again. That should give us an error. But if we do /var /lib /php session /ses underscore command V, and we should see if I spelled this correctly. Yes, we went to some string. So now this is saved. And the great thing about proxy is you don't have to keep typing it in. You can just navigate back and forth between requests. Why is that hanging? Anyway, so we can just copy our PHP web shell and send that. So all we have to do is go through here, paste in our web shell, press send, and we can see that didn't go through. So all we have to do is go back to here and press send. And why isn't this working? Oh, God, It's a demo curse, I swear. Every time we try to do a demo, something goes wrong. Why isn't this working? Okay, so, oh, oops, that's why it didn't work. Now let's try. Okay. And then let's just go back here and copy. Let's try copying that instead and sending it. It's not working. In fact, okay, let's do this since it doesn't, Burpsuit doesn't want to be nice, even though I tried this yesterday and it worked. Let's just do this through the web browser. So I'm just going to copy this just so I can keep copying it back and forth easily. So I just want to go to here. Okay, there we go. Now we were seeing the correct error message. And then we want to go through to here. And we want to do and cmd equals ls/, since we know that it's in our base directory, the flag. And we do see some flag file, flag with something appended on. So all we have to do is go back to this injector web shell again. In fact, let me copy this before I forget it. So now let's just inject again. And now all we have to do is go here, go back to our session file, and just send the command and cmd equals cat / with our flag name. And we should be able to, yes, and we can read the flag after much difficulty. Are there any questions with that challenge? So finally, let's just talk about remote file inclusion. So what is RFI? RFI stands for remote file inclusion. It's when the web page allows for remotely hosted files. So you have files on your machine that you actually upload to the web page, and requires the following to be enabled. It requires allow URL fopen as well as allow URL include. So gain RFI. To gain RFI, of course, we first need to find the vulnerable parameter, and on your machine, navigate to the directory where your file is. So the best thing to do in this case is just have an index.php or an exploit.php file with the web shell I showed you earlier, and that will allow you to execute OS level commands. With the gain RFI, run the following command. We do python 3 tacm http.server, and we just specify a port. Just in this case, I'm saying port 8080. So what is this? This is just a local website, local web host. So if I just do, for example, python 3 tacm HTTP server, and I'm specifying port 8070, and we can see it's listening the server HTTP on port 8070 using localhost. So if I just open up a web browser, go to localhost on port 8070, you can see I just have all my files listed, as we can see here. So this is just a different directory. I ran this in when I took this picture, and I just had a few files as well as an exploit.php file. So to gain RFI, so once that's done, we have to keep that on, and we navigate to parameter, and we do http ://localhost, our port number /file name. And we can use this to gain RCE if we have a web shell in a file. We just have to do, instead, just chain our parameter together, and we can do and cmd equals ID, And this is a lot faster since you don't have to keep going back and forth between two different web pages all the time. You can just change the parameter and it'll execute whatever command you have. Are there any questions on this? Doesn't look like it, so let's move on. It's time for the final challenge. This is where the challenge is at. I'll just post the IP in chat. It's a different machine. As you can see, the IP is different. It's a different machine just because it's a lot bigger. Just a small note about this. You can solve this using RFI, but you don't need it. So it might be a little more difficult to get RFI working for this challenge, which is what I found when testing it. So if you can't get it working, no worries. You can also solve this challenge without using RFI. And I'll give you about 15 minutes before I move on to a partial solution of this challenge. Hey everyone, so it's been about 15 minutes and I'm gonna move ahead with a partial solution for this challenge. Not gonna give you the whole thing, but if people are a bit stuck, I'm just gonna give you a little bit so you can maybe get started on it or a little more further than what you already have. So let's just go to our website. Let me, which is not. So let me try copying that again. Now will you let me? There we go. And you can see we have our standard website again, and we already know our vulnerable parameter. Since we know the flag is in the user's home directory, let's just try reading etc password to see if there's an easy solution. And we can see if we read a warning, it failed, and we were actually trying to read etc password.php. So the best, as I've said before, best thing to do in this scenario is to read the source code. So we can read the source code, or the base64 of the source code, and we see it here. And all we have to do is decode using any tool we want. CyberChef is always a great option. So we go to CyberChef, wait for it to load. And we want to go from base64. So we just paste it in, and we can see our PHP source code here. We see wrappers, and we see some comments left in. Make sure to delete /omni is never gone. Don't let them know we still control mom and pops and always will. So that gives us a hint to go to /omni is never gone. And we can see we have a new web page, similar parameter, and that's all I can really, and that's all I'm really going to show you for now. And so that's where you start off. And I'm going to leave this machine up for a couple more hours. It's 8:18 right now, so I'm probably going to take it down around 11. So if you're trying to attempt this, and if you have any questions or get stuck anywhere, feel free to shoot me a message on Discord and I'll respond, and I'll try to give you a hand, I should say. So now let's just go forward with a small conclusion, a basic recap of this workshop. You use LFI to read files if we know their exact location. We can use LFI to gain RCE through the PHP sessions. Or we can use PHP wrappers to gain RCE and or read the source code of the website. And finally, we can use RFI to upload malicious files. And just one small note again, I did see a lot of people trying RFI on the last challenge. Just again, it's not needed to solve the challenge. So if it's not working for you, don't worry too much about it. So some try hack me rooms. So file inclusion. Try Hack Me has a really great room on file inclusion. I suggest giving that a look if you really enjoyed today's workshop. Hopefully you did. And also, as I mentioned earlier, it also has a really great set of rooms on Burp Suite. I really recommend giving that a try because Burp Suite is such a powerful tool, has many functionalities besides what I showed you today. And finally, just some basic housekeeping items. Don't forget to vote in the election. You have until next week to vote. If you received a vote, please remember to vote. And finally, just a quick announcement. Our last club meeting will be in person, April 11th, I believe. It's our final club meeting. We'll just be meeting in person at the UFC just to play some games. If you want to come out and meet the other execs, feel free to stop by. Just a small note on that, just to comply with student union rules and regulations. Masks will be required for that as per University of Calgary rules. And student union does require an attendance list. So keep an eye on the Discord for this week. We will be releasing an attendance form for you to sign up if you want to attend. And that's all I have. Thanks for coming out. Sorry we ran a bit overtime. And have a great day, everyone.